I'll let Terry introduce himself. He's a luminary in the space, a pioneer in photonics, and so you want to give a brief background?
Sure. I'm a theoretical physicist. I was in academia until about 10 years ago, and then became a founder of PsiQuantum, which is a photonic approach to building a quantum computer. And yeah, I guess we're probably now the largest startup quantum computing space based down in Palo Alto.
Excellent. So I'll start off with just a high-level question, almost building off of the last slide there, which I think is pretty much the key question here, which is where are we now on that chart, and how far and how fast do we expect to go to get to that red dot on ECDSA? As that's basically the critical question here. To sort of break it up, evaluating the progress in quantum computing is tough for someone that's not inside the community. I know I've been paying attention to it for a while, and it's not like a new technology. It's been around, theorized since Feynman and David Deutsch, and then it sort of was always 5-10 years away. And so I think people have developed a bit of scar tissue that the sort of hype cycle comes and goes. Is this just another hype cycle? If you're paying attention to the sort of financial news media, you see, quantum-related stocks going on this run, and it sort of seems like it's generating a bit of like a media focus that may be delaminated from the technical conversations that you're having. So just to kind of give me your honest perspective, kind of being in the field, seeing kind of the progress day to day, month to month, year over year. Like, what is the rate of change that you have observed? Do you see that rate of change at a very high level, like shifting? The analogy might be in the AI community, right? There was lots of attempts at generating scalable deep learning models, and it took a few weird tricks. And once those weird tricks were unlocked, true scaling could be achieved by just throwing more data and compute at the problem, and you actually saw these exponentials take off. And so from my perspective, where are we in that analogy? Do we have a kind of a continuous rate of change? Is that a pretty high rate of change? Is it a low rate of change? Is that rate of change itself changing? Like, what's like your perspective?
So an analogy I like to use is the following, and it's a very precise analogy. Imagine you want to make a big block of ice. So you get a big tub of water and you start removing heat from it. The point at which you transition to making ice happens extremely rapidly, exponentially fast. You need two things. One is, if you want a big block of ice, you need a big tub of water, and you've got to just keep continually removing the heat. Now, the thing about fault-tolerant quantum computing is it is exactly a phase transition in a physical system like ice. This is not just like me making up a silly analogy. So if you make a big enough thing and you get your noise rate low enough, then you almost instantly get your fault-tolerant quantum computer. It happens exponentially fast. And so no one has, so I think the Google Willow chip is the only thing you could say that has actually achieved close to that transition. Now, it's done it on an incredibly small system, and it's not just a question of how many logical qubits you need, but it's also, for every logical qubit, you want to ask two questions. One is like, how low is the error rate on it, and how fast can it compute? In the Google thing, they got just beyond the underlying physical error rate of the systems on the chip. So, it's not just a question of take that Google chip and multiply it 10,000 times, which is what we would roughly have to do. They've also got to find a way of getting the noise rates lower, connecting them, as Sho said. Also, there just doesn't exist the large-scale infrastructure to cool them down. But essentially, this is what's going to happen, is that someone is going to transition through this phase transition, and it's going to come just as fast as AI came and hit people in the face.
Sho, your perspective, obviously, on the you work a little more on the algorithm side, but you also kind of have to plug and play between the different hardware approaches and the slides that you mentioned there. The wild diversity of different approaches to solving this problem is, I think, overwhelming for someone who's not deeply steeped in this. And if you're just casually paying attention to the developments, you see these headlines, you see the Marjorana 1 announcement, you see Willow. Occasionally a press release will come with some extravagant claim. And I think a lot of that drives the conversation in the Bitcoin spaces. There's another breakthrough. Is it just around the corner? From someone who's developing solutions, commercial applications, like, what do you pay attention to, right, in terms of the rate of progress across these different hardware, solution spaces, and like, what is your personal perception of that, like, rate of change, right? This sort of nonlinearity associated with these different kind of basic building blocks, these sort of core primitives to get to a fault-tolerant quantum computer. Do you think there's like a few key unlocks? Is it an impossible quest? What's your sort of gut take on how far we have to go?
Yeah. So as Terry said, I think we are on set of like phase transition, but in that sense, we haven't make this time of transition yet because we haven't built the fully scalable FTQC yet. So we have technological components like error correction and like non-transversal, like T-gate, gate injection, gate teleportation, and scaling up. There are some technological components we need to combine, fit into one machine. We haven't succeeded yet. So in that sense, it's very, currently we need to see each component, development of each component. But once we have the one FTQC, as Terry said, error is probably high and size is not enough, but scaling up is more like a continuous transition. So you can see it's more like a predictable phase. But before that, we have to see the FTQC come in our life. So in a sense, to predict when this type of transition happens, we need to see each component and readiness of each component. That's my opinion. And when we talk about the timeline, well, it's very hard to predict, but quantum hardware companies claims like 5 to 10 years they will make this type of architecture. So I think 3 to 5 years probably we will have FTQC, and then we can predict more easily to see when the kind of real quantum computer application will come in life.
So this is the trillion-dollar question, but just give me your hot take on it. So that other slide you had, which is kind of the matrix of the different hardware-based approaches and their different sort of competitive strengths and weaknesses, and they're sort of optimizing for sort of certain sort of paths to the goal, right? Do you think that, on average over the next 5 years, they will roughly stay close to each other, kind of maybe one takes the lead and, with a particular breakthrough, another one catches up, so that by the end of this sort of rough 3 to 5 year time horizon, all 4 of those approaches will still be sort of live contenders for the prize? Or do you see kind of, a possibility that 2 just sort of fall out because for whatever reason they just sort of hit a bottleneck and they don't make it? In terms of monitoring breakthroughs across all these different potential hardware approaches, they have different optimizations, like different paths, almost basic physics to get to the end goal. It's very hard to kind of assess, okay, well, what's the rate of change in that particular technological track? Are they close to getting to the FTQC sort of end game? And do I have to assess all 4 or 5 or sort of hybrid approaches? So just how do you, from your own perspective, evaluate? Obviously, you've made a big bet on the photonic side, so you think that's going to work. But across these different candidate architectures, do you see them all kind of getting to that end goal? They all have roadmaps, but roadmap might be different than what you actually see on the ground.
So, particularly for this community, I would say out of the 4, which I think were the correct 4 to think about, superconducting qubits, cold atoms, ions, and photonics, I would not at all think about cold atoms and ions, because they're just, even if you're incredibly optimistic that they can do everything, the physics of atoms and ions is incredibly slow, and it's limited by, the properties of electrons and atoms that are not going to change. And so even if they build a fault-tolerant quantum computer, it's going to be 10,000 times slower than a superconducting qubit or a photonic machine, or even more than that. So, an algorithm that'll take, say, an hour on a photonic machine, I think the estimates are like 160 days on an ion or cold atom machine. So yeah, they're good for raising funding, they're good for good science, they're good for, and I actually did my PhD in that area. And for me as a scientist, it's just amazing that they did. I did this in the mid-90s. It was just inconceivable that we could do something like that. But if you're serious about what is an actual computational thread of a quantum computer, you want to know how many logical qubits, what's the logical gate speed, how much power is this thing consuming per logical operation, and so on and so on. The same thing that you do with classical computers. And so I would just say, focus in on the only 2 approaches that have a possibility of a fast logical gate speed, which is superconducting qubits and photonics.
And do you think those will converge, whether they take different elements of a hybrid architecture? Do you think there's a shot where it's just photonics and you get to the end?
Okay, so yeah, maybe I should say, there is a possibility for the cold atoms and ions. It's still very much a far-flung research endeavor to do something where they convert their quantum states into photonics, and then we use fast switches to multiplex them or something. There is some potential roadmap for them to increase their logical gate speeds using photonics, but it's very much unproven territory. So then it comes down really to superconducting qubits and photonics. Superconducting qubits, in principle, you can convert the quantum states into photons and then convert those photons into the sort of photons that we can put in optical fibers. And the reason they might want to do that is, well, a very good reason for them to do it, is that photons don't feel heat, and you can't fit all the superconducting qubits you need in one single refrigerator. And so they're going to need many refrigerators, and how do they connect those things? They have to all be quantumly connected and networked. It's very challenging to do it. If you can convert your quantum states into visible light type frequencies, then you can connect them with optical fiber that you can just go down and buy at Fry's Electronics if it hadn't gone bankrupt. So, there is a potential for. Let's say, I do think that some approaches for superconducting qubits will go this way. We've sort of just tried to cut out the middleman. We say, okay, we're not going to make the quantum states with some matter-based system and then convert them to photons. We're just going to start with the photons from the start. That has many challenges of its own. But that's roughly speaking, I think, the only two ways I can see to doing really large-scale quantum computing.
Sho, what's your take on that? Agree, disagree?
I have slightly different opinion. I agree about the truly scalable quantum computing. Probably superconducting and neutral atom ion trap are too slow to do a scalable calculation. But when we think about the earliest application, like decryption or some earliest application, the situation might be different. That's my opinion. So I feel like neutral atom or ion trap might be something like a vacuum tube, and superconducting and photonic might be like transistor. So because vacuum tube use some sort of fundamental physical phenomena, so that was stable, so we can easily to realize. So first computer was made by vacuum tube, but it's finally overtaken by transistor. So in that sense, probably the ultimate neutral atom and ion trap might not be ultimate winner, but first realization by FTQC might be on FTQC, might be this architecture, and they might reach to the level of earliest commercial applications. So that's what do you think?
Interesting. Okay, so you could have this almost like a, maybe double hit where somebody just manages to cross that threshold with some of these different approaches, but maybe that's like their ceiling. And there could be like a lag before these more long-term solutions kind of catch up, and then ultimately that's okay. Oh, sorry. Yeah, we just we'll I think, are we gonna do a Q&A after? Okay, we'll just do 2 more minutes and we'll open up a Q&A. So I want to boil this down to what should we be paying attention to, right? The shorthand is like logical qubits, right? We are at maybe 1-ish, depending on how you count it, and maybe some people have what they debate is a logical qubit, right? It's a sort of ambiguity in exactly what a logical qubit is. But that's like the rough measure, is once we get to 1,000 logical qubits, we're in sort of the danger zone, right? And that as we go from where we are now, in the single digits maybe, to hundreds to thousands, that's kind of the order of magnitude sort of step function jumps where the Bitcoin community sort of has to have an order of magnitude more sort of risk perception, right? So we're not clearly there yet. So my question is, if we're sort of 2 orders of magnitude away from the danger zone, what are the most likely triggers that you see that would give us that step function jump, that sort of first one, right? So what should we be paying attention to as the next milestone, breakthrough, something like Mars 101, something like Willow's next chip, or something else, maybe another algorithmic breakthrough? Is there 1 or 2 key unlocks that the community is all hunting for, that if that is achieved, everyone should sort of update their risk perception? Or do you expect it to be just a small series of incremental hardware, architecture, optimizations, kind of the continuous churn of these different R&D roadmaps. Because obviously the folks in this room can't pay attention to all those different details. And so are there like a handful of big breakthroughs that people talk about at the conferences that are kind of on the horizon, that if we see those happen, we should sort of dramatically update our rough sort of timelines?
Well, yeah, actually this is, I would say this is difficult situation right now because we, like 5 years ago, 3 years ago, superconducting qubit is definitely the like a leader of the market. So we just see the bottleneck of superconducting qubit. But now we have many different architecture, like trying to reach to the same goal. So these different architecture has different bottlenecks. So probably we need to carefully assess what's the bottleneck in this architecture. So superconducting, for sure, the connectivity is the bottleneck. And neutral atom, I think error rate is harder to decrease, and ion trap scaling up is a bottleneck, and photonic probably error rate is a bottleneck. So they have different bottlenecks, and we need to see which breakthrough happens first. So that's difficult to assess, but yeah, we need to see carefully. So we need to care about the difference of the architecture. That's my opinion.
So I would look for superconducting qubits. It's kind of like they don't know how to make the big tub to hold the water. If someone comes up with something that, a refrigerator that can hit millikelvin temperatures and cool, let's say 100,000 would be an incredible number of qubits. Okay, that would have them within an order of magnitude of what they need. No one has such a thing. The biggest dilution refrigerator being built now at Fermilab is sort of 10 times bigger than the Google one, so maybe can take 1,000. If someone comes up with something that can do 100,000, and that's just a refrigerator technology, go out and ask the people building these fridges, can they do it? That would be something I would go like, yeah, that's a massive step change in what they'll be able to do. For photonics, if someone comes up with a way, so our biggest challenge is not so much noise rate as footprint, like the number of systems. We have this big overhead to do with the fact that the photons don't interact with each other, they just sort of interfere with each other. We expend huge amounts of resources making small photonic entangled states. There are many other ways of making entangled photonic states. Atoms emit them, ions, quantum dots. There's all sorts of other ways of making entangled states, and none of those are currently good enough to do fault-tolerant quantum computing. They're not reproducible enough, they're not fast enough, they're not low noise enough. But any massive breakthrough like that, which doesn't seem completely unreasonable, that should cause you to update your priors on photonic quantum computing very, very fast. Those would be the two sort of engineering type things I would be looking out for.
So that's actually a setup for my last question to put you on the spot here, right? Which is, if you had to pick, 1 year, that's kind of your median estimate for when you think a cryptographically relevant, fault-tolerant quantum computer would pose a material threat to ECDSA. What year would you pick as your, the 50th percentile?
Yeah, I would say 5 years from now, or I don't know, it can be delayed, but looking at the most aggressive hardware roadmap, 5 years is feasible. But if they delay, probably about 5 to 10 years scale, that's the feasible timeline, in my opinion.
And I guess I should ask, could you, give me just a shape of that probability distribution? Is it pretty tight around that 5 year, or does it have a massive tail on either side?
I think it's kind of tight. So we see all the technological stack is ready for FTQC. So making fully functional FTQC will be ready in 1-2 years. If that's that is successful, probably 5 to 10 years is not a crazy number.
How about you?
Well, you said it's $1 trillion question, so give me the $1 trillion and you'll get the answer.
We can put some hedges on.
Well, if it's a bet between us, I say 5 years and 1 day, and then I suspect I'm more likely to win the bet. So the biggest changes in cryptographic relevance are going to come from algorithms, I think. Building stuff is slow and expensive. We've already seen, algorithmic development is sort of on an exponential curve. It's not the case that all architectures for quantum computing have equivalent cryptographic relevance. There's some things you can do with the non-locality of photonics you can't do with other architectures, and some of that is cryptographically relevant. So, yeah, I would, it's just not the case that we've been twiddling our thumbs since Shaw's paper and haven't made progress. We've made huge algorithmic progress, and people programming quantum computers now are like Turing with a piece of paper trying to work out what you're going to do with a classical computer. Turing couldn't have invented, important technology like Instagram, could he? So he was just doing stuff by hand. And that's what we're doing with quantum computers. We don't have a quantum computer. We don't really know how fast progress will be once we do. And we're using a bunch of classical computers and smart people to try and improve those algorithms. And it's hard. It's as hard as Turing trying to come up with Instagram by hand. So yeah, I would definitely keep an eye on the algorithm space more than anything.
Awesome. You had a question?
Yeah. So I was wondering, once a lot of the things that you described sound extremely expensive, like the cooling, the setting up, the inventing new hardware, the setting up big structures of these hardwares. So once people start being able to do anything meaningful in a lab, how long until it becomes economically feasible to do computations? Like, what is the cost of doing a quantum decryption of an ECDSA public key to a private key? And do you have any predictions on like what the timeline would be where that would become something people actually want to do economically?
I think it's already more like an engineering, not academia project. Like, Google has the best chip of superconducting, so it's not like academia project anymore, more like industrial-led projects. So we should keep an eye on hardware companies' progress.
And it doesn't actually cost that much to run any particular compute once you actually have the system set up.
Cost of running it? Well,
It's not trivial. You got to run a cryo plant, and your build materials is very expensive. If you just want to, obviously I can't talk through concrete business plans and models, and we do a hell of a lot of modeling of all of this kind of stuff. But no one's going to spend less than 1 billion, and no one's going to spend more than 10 billion to build the first, let's say, few hundred logical qubit quantum computer. And so the cost per logical qubit you expect will go down like it did with classical computers as people get better at, particularly if you're doing semiconductor manufacturing like we're doing, and the cost is, manufacturing and packaging and assembly and stuff. You can sort of predict how it'll go down. And then you just have to say, how many logical qubits does my quantum algorithm need? And is that cost per I need another 50, that's going to cost X amount more. And you can do that kind of stuff yourself. You'll be within an order of magnitude of correct.
I'll defer to you.
Yeah. Two really just quick things. So first of all, I just wanted to say, like, from an information theoretic perspective, I think we should also consider, like, when to be worried. Like, consider Satoshi's coins move. Maybe that would indicate that someone has machinery powerful enough to solve discrete log or something like that. So I would make that comment. But
I'm definitely on the side of give it to whoever manages it. If you build a quantum computer, you should get it. You should get those coins.
Yeah. And then brief, just quick follow-up to that. What is your opinion on the possibility of like a governmental agency or some nation state achieving this technology before industry does, and not revealing the nature of that to the community?
I can answer part of that. So I did consulting for the government on classified programs, and that's kind of my high-level comment is that the timelines that these gentlemen are stating in terms of the commercial frontier, right? You have to apply some discount factor to where you think the classified research labs, and we'll talk about this in the quantum threat model session in terms of who we think we're actually modeling here, whether it's National Security Agency, whether it's a subset of the PLA, other groups out there. But I think the safe assumption is that governments are probably ahead, but I'm curious, you all, do you think, the governments are that much further ahead, years ahead or months ahead, or are they actually just waiting for the commercial sector to lead and then they'll just sort of incorporate those breakthroughs?
So, okay. So what do you mean by government is ahead? Because as far as I know, in the States, at least in the States, best hardwares are built by academia or companies. So in that sense, government need to access to that. So I think companies are ahead. But when we think globally, the situation might be a bit different because, actually quantum computing race is mostly, roughly speaking, between US and China. And Chinese government found a lot in quantum computing, and they are recently don't reveal a lot of information. So in that sense, this race we do not know. Yeah. But in my opinion, still US has the most advanced technologies, but China tried to catch up. But after 5 years, the situation might be changed.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I don't think in the West there's any chance that the governments have behind closed doors, a more advanced quantum technology. I fundamentally don't believe that. I know a lot of the scientists in government labs, and they're good, but they're not that good. In China, it's a little bit different, obviously, because, well, what's the separation? And at least, I can only speak to the photonic side of things. The lead of the photonics in China, who's the lead of all the quantum computing in China, he and I were postdocs together, actually, in the lab of Anton Zeilinger in like the year 2000 or something. And he's a very nice guy, and I'd love to meet with him. Unfortunately, it's very difficult for us to meet up and talk science. But I can look at what they're saying publicly or what they're doing publicly, and it's state of the art photonics, but it's not somehow vastly ahead of anyone kind of thing. So they would have to also have a massive disconnect, and then somehow he would have to be keeping some big separation between these things and only being public. I just don't think that's probably what's happening. But yeah, I'm no expert in that kind of thing.
So Matt, we're going to do 2 questions, but I need to ask you to do me a favor. Keep them under 6 minutes in total. So 2 more, we'll squeeze them in.
So Matthew mentioned the name of David Deutsch, and he is the one who basically generalized the Church-Turing principle in, I think, 1985 to quantum computers as well. But he has a different view on quantum computation than most other people, as far as I know. He basically attributes the extra juice that is needed to multiverses or multiverse. So basically my question is, to frame it in a Bitcoin mimetic way, where does the yield come from?
Look, I think it doesn't actually matter. David and myself and anyone else, we all agree that mathematically what's the right description of the physics of a quantum computer. We can argue philosophically about how to extract from that mathematics about where and how the computer's being done. But what you have to realize is that a quantum computer is coming because it is just quantum physics, and it is now just engineering. And if any of these quantum computers don't work, that would be far more shocking than, let's say, the Large Hadron Collider having found gremlins coming out of it and black holes or something. Like it's just at least photonic quantum computers, they're derived from quantum field theory. These things are just standard quantum mechanics, and foundations of quantum mechanics and interpretations don't really factor into the question of will they work or not. They will work, or we have to throw out quantum physics, and that would obviously be very exciting. But yeah, I don't know what I would tell the investors. It would be a bit of a challenge.
Yeah, my other degree was in philosophy, and I was very much obsessed with his metaphysical questions of quantum mechanics. And I think if you're curious to sort of try to get at least your arms around some of this, there's a gentleman named Jonathan Garrard who has a useful model of what we think is happening sort of underneath quantum mechanics, where you might see like, where does the yield come from? It comes from a different degree of freedom, right? That if you construct the right types of systems, you're essentially slicing this larger structure. and you can, there's no free lunch in the universe. The universe is computational, and so if it's multi-way, computation, you're sort of stealing from some parts of those computational branches. But the way we are designing these very complicated artifacts is to isolate a certain thread of computation and sort of take maybe from some sort of broadly distributed available computations in the universe and making it useful to us, right? So the universe is seething with potentially useful quantum computations. We're constructing specific circuits to solve problems that are human relevant. So there's not like a free lunch. It's just sort of designing an engine, right? There's energy out there in the universe. It's just not useful for most human purposes until you design the right artifact. That's like my model is there's actually computation happening all the time in the universe, and we're just sort of engineering artifacts that allow us to sort of extract useful computations out of that sort of sea of computations. Anyways, but that's like metaphysics. Ultimately, at the end of the day, you put a problem in, you get an answer out. If it's the hash or the private key, then it is what it is.
2 minutes, one more.
Yeah. First, thank you guys so much. Like, this has been a really informative and interesting session. Going back to the 5-year roadmap, the IBM roadmap, one of the things that struck me looking at it is it seemed like it kind of took for granted the simplicity of scaling up the number of logical qubits once we figure out how to connect 2 of them, right? It seemed like there's this sort of 0 to 1 problem of like, how do we get 2 of these things talking to each other? And then after that, it's just straight shot to cryptographically relevant quantum computing in 5 years. On the classical side of the industry, I think we've learned over the last 2 or 3 decades that when you start connecting more computers together, you get novel failure modes and you end up with more problems than you started with. I'd love for you guys to just take a minute or so and talk about what are the challenges that we know about with connecting multiple logical qubits together.
It's a fantastic question. I'm not going to talk to IBM's roadmap. I mean,
I would.
A little bit like a religion or something. But the photonic approach, what we do is very similar to a data center, but as a data center with liquid helium, it's a bunch of photonic chips being connected by optical fiber, and with some classical control. And the biggest difference being we have some cryogenically cooled detectors. We hire a huge number of people from the supercomputer and data center industry. Like we are building these cabinets and connecting them already and doing this stuff. And this is exactly the sort of thing that those people have been doing for us and modeling for us all the way from the start. I had no clue before, I'm a physicist, I had no clue about that massive set of scaling challenges, and I very, very much doubt IBM do too.
We have time for one more Hunter Beast. I see him.
Can you keep it under a minute? Okay. As Matt mentioned, there's no such thing as free lunch, so the time we're spending here is coming from your break later. I'm sure you'll be happy with that. That's fine.
So my question is for Terry. I see you building your blueprint architecture. You're actually going for 99.99% error correction codes. You're building suspiciously scalable hardware in that it looks almost like how a Bitcoin miner might scale. And so I got to ask. It looks so. How would you say? I just got to ask. Do you have plans for quantum key recovery? And if not, what's keeping you from doing that?
We do not have plans, and we do get a lot of inbound interest from many sectors of the world, and mainly AI, for our hardware and for sort of classical uses of our hardware. But the quantum side of what we're doing is hard, and that's what we're focused on. And there's no. You can't hide this stuff as well. It's a company of hundreds of people, right? It's not like we're going to start putting out. Yeah. Anyway,
What would you say? Why would you say? Because your hardware could be capable of doing that. So I'm just saying, what keeps you from doing that?
So if you're talking about could we use it for classical stuff?
No. For
the quantum side of things, it's still you need a bigger machine than we're currently doing at lower error rates than what we currently have. But those are the sorts of things that are made as strategic decisions in a company that you know, people, you have to sit down and say, is this something, and you know, who you engage with in both the government and other commercial sectors and so on. Those are all strategic decisions that are made. They're not obviously things you necessarily say publicly, but they're also not, you know, you've got a board and hundreds of people and so on. Like it's not stuff which I think you should be too cloak and dagger about. Yeah.
I think what Hunter's asking is, once you have a computer that does, will you take bitcoins?
All right, with that said, I'm going to jump in. We're over.
Yes.
We're over. We got a jam-packed schedule. There's plenty of time later to continue these discussions over happy hour and food and views and all that good stuff. Let's give a round of applause, please.